This episode of Speak Now, Hold Your Peace is brought to you in part by Green Sister Botanicals, plant-based hair and body care. Visit greensister.com for your hair. She's good. She's good. Every time there's a shooting, people are saying, we need more gun control law.
That's just human nature.
Welcome to Speak Now, Hold Your Peace, a live broadcast with real conversations about community social issues, politics, business, health, self-care, and more. We broadcast live on the Speak Now, Hold Your Peace Facebook group and the Speak Now, Hold Your Peace YouTube channel. And now, here's your host, Saywuddafeel Dre.
What's going on? What's going on? Let's just say what I feel. Dre from Speak Now, Hold Your Peace, and I'm laughing because I changed the intro up. So at the end of it, I was getting out the car, walking in slow motion, and my daughter was like, "You acting like you stepping out of a Benz or something. You got a 2017." She was like, "You got a 2017 Elantra. You ain't saying nothing."
What I got my Tim's on, my PK jersey on. What? You jump right out on them.
Yo, man. Yo, I stepped out on. I was like, yo, I ain't mean to look like that. It's just a slow motion thing. When you slow it down, it looked like you special. Pop you know what I'm saying? So I was laughing at
Kids
that.
always tell you the truth.
They
Man.
do. She's like, you rocking she's like, you driving a 2017 Elantra. I was like, okay, your kids will put it to you straight, man. The kids will say anything.
Yes, they do.
They do not lie. They do not lie.
You can't ever be mad at them for it.
You actually can't, man. You can't penalize them for telling the truth, man. So welcome everybody to Speak Now, Hold Your Peace. Like I said, I'm saying what I feel. I got two guests today. We're going to talk about the consequences of youth crimes. Should they be in detention? Should they be rehabilitated? There's difference of opinions, and I'm going to tell you what sparked all of that once I introduce my guests. I got two guests today. They're going to help me figure all of this stuff out. My first guest is Impress, and she I've seen her talk on a couple other another show, and I've always thought that she was pretty knowledgeable based on some of the things I hear her talk about. She was very sure of herself, and I think I thought she was a great fit for the show. So give it up for Impress. What's up?
Hello, good night, everyone.
All right. And I got my man 50 grand right here, man. I work with this brother, man, and we worked with kids, and these kids had some challenges, and one thing about him was that he commanded respect and from the kids, and what he got was the respect from the kids and his coworkers. We all respected him. Definitely thought he was a leader. Definitely has leadership qualities. I take one of him before I take a thousand halfway workers who slack off and do their job. So give it up for my man Claude. Claude, what up?
Hey, what's up, Dre? Appreciate the compliments, brother.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot. Pleasure being here, my man.
No doubt, my brother. No doubt. Glad y'all here, man. So look, man, I want to talk about the purpose of what this show is about. I want to talk about if kids should get should they go to juvenile detention when they commit these major crimes, or should they get rehabilitated? And one of the things, the major events that sparked this was a carjacking in D.C. It was two teens on March 20. Let me see, I have here March 23rd. Two girls attempted to carjack 66-year-old Muhammad Anwar of Springfield, Virginia. And I want to say his name because I wanted, if you want to say some prayers for his family, then please do. It's Muhammad Anwar. I'm sorry. The two teens, they tried to carjack him. They got in the car. They had a stun gun, so they had hit him with the stun gun. A struggle started to happen, and then the kids got into the car, took off. Mr. Anwar was halfway in the car. I believe it was halfway in the car as they took off. The kid hit one of the kids that was driving hit they hit a curb, and the car flipped. And what happened when the car flipped? Uh, Mr. Anwar broke some bones. He had a head injury, and he later on he died from his injuries. Uh, at this time, they're charging the two teenage girls with felony murder and armed carjacking. Um, I think they're currently being held in the juvenile detention center. Um, there's been mixed feelings about this. So, some people are saying um, they need to serve time in jail if they're found guilty. Which, by the way, these two girls pled not guilty. I I don't know how. I don't know the circumstances of pleading not guilty. But they pled not guilty. I think they call it, what do they call it in DC? Not involved. When you're dealing with juveniles, it's not involved. It's not guilty. Same thing though. So they're being held in detention. Some people are saying if they're convicted, they should do time in juvenile detention and then prison. Assuming that they get more years than let's see, 15 years old. Assuming that they get like 10 years, 10 years or more, they need to finish their sentence in jail. All right. So others are saying no, they don't need to be in jail. They need help. They need to be rehabilitated. They should not go to jail for a mistake that they made, a mistake that actually cost someone's life to add on to it. Just wanted to let you guys know that. So I'm going to start with the question from both you, Claude, and you, Impress. Impress, you can start first. What do you think? Do you think these juveniles need to serve time if convicted?
Yes, but not in the way that we would normally see it. I don't think it's conducive for adults to just be thrown into prison. Here,
Mm-hmm.
sit here, do your time, get out, make something of your life. Like, as a person, like psychologically, there needs to be some type of rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So as children, and I did some reading on the incident. One is 15, one is 13.
Right.
At that age, especially the 13-year-old, their brains are still developing.
Mm-hmm.
It's still like cutting away things they don't use, trying to put together what they do use, trying to make sense out of the world separate from their authority figures. We don't know what type of influence they've had or are continuing around. And impulse control is something that doesn't really develop until your mid 20s. Which is why you see like why you call college kids. They're over 18, but they still function much like children just because their brains haven't solidified as adults yet.
Right.
So if they're getting a consequence, let the consequence be something that is corrective, not punitive.
Okay.
We know punitive doesn't work.
Okay. And when I ask these questions today, I'm asking on the opposing side. So I'm asking from both sides. So if you say something and I ask you a question that goes against it, it's because I'm not disagreeing with you or taking any side. I'm just asking the questions that the opposing side would answer. So Claude, what do you think? You think these kids should serve time?
Well, I think is even in the question that it highlights a major problem we have in the United States in particular. When you're talking about weighing prison versus rehabilitation, prison is supposed to be rehabilitation, correct?
Right.
So that's the first problem with how our perception of what prison is. We know through experience and through interacting with people who have been to prison that it's not a lot of rehabilitation happening in prison for most people.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about children and deciding, at a point of their lives that Empress led to, where their brains aren't developed there yet. And I'm not making excuses. First of all, my condolences out to the family of Anwar. I mean, his family and everyone that's affected by that, because it's a different perspective. This is somebody you care about, and you
Right.
want to know that, this person is, not vilified, but, that the people responsible for whatever done to him have served some consequence. I understand that. But at the same time, us as a community, as a country, we owe it to our youth to try to, save this life as well, because this is actually a person at a kid at a very critical point in their life, where a decision they made a very that had adult consequences, and they're going to feel the effects of this for the rest of their life, one way or another. So I know I'm kind of like, talking theoretical, and I'm not really answering your question, and I'm just saying all that to say this is a very
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
question to answer. And from my perspective, yes, rehabilitation has to be your first course of action. You got to try to save this kid and catch this kid at a teaching moment, and understand the long-term consequences of their decisions. I mean, Gray, we talked about it. You talked about it earlier, the work we've done working with kids with severe emotional and mental health issues. There's a lot of kids dealing with trauma, coming from
Mhm.
all forms and types throughout their life, and that obviously affected who how this kid became to be, and the decisions they made. So if you want to ask just the question how I feel, rehabilitation has to be first. But and with that being said, I understand the need for some kind of feeling of consequence, but I feel like the consequence has to be logical. It has to be a logical consequence. It has to be just some punitive doorway to book, because it's going to ease the pain. Because bottom line, this person is not coming back. But we have two lives where we can affect and change, and hopefully get them on a track that hopefully of some kind of redemption for themselves, and their families. So that I guess if you want to ask me to answer the question, that's my answer.
Okay. Okay. And it's a very good answer too. Very good answer. So, from what I heard from both of you, uh, Impress, you mentioned it, and Claude, you mentioned it a little bit indirectly, kind of directly. Uh, was influences play a role in it too, in terms of what they who they're influenced by, which is crazy because next week I'm doing a show on breaking the chains of family chains and stuff like that. But um, in terms of the influences, do you think did either one of you think that that should be considered when hearing their case? Should a judge consider influences? Do you think a judge should consider
Absolutely.
that? You think so?
Yeah, you have
Absolutely.
to. You have to. You have to look at these kids and get a psychological evaluation, and see what kind of experiences. And I know one of the surveys or the tools that we use is like the ACEs tool. Adverse childhood experiences, where you kind of figure out the different things, and you'd be surprised how many adults are affected by things that happen to them as children. So I always look at
Yes,
it, from a
absolutely.
psychological standpoint. A person becomes to a certain part, different experience as different things that you go through and experience as a child help you develop this personality. That's outward in your personality, or this character that's facing outwards towards the rest of the world, the person that everyone else sees. We have perceptions. People feel very early they have perceptions in different guidelines that they have to hold up to. Whether that's a gang culture, whether that's just a perception in your neighborhood, whether that's perception to your just regular peers, or whatever the case may be. And I'm not, like I said, I would never make excuses for what happened. But obviously a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old kid, it had to be some very serious influences in their life that led them down this road. And I think that has to be evaluated before deciding whatever decision you want to make about that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives.
Right, right. And
Right.
Brian, he just came on here. Brian left a comment. Influences should be heard. Okay, so yeah, I agree with that. Um, in terms of when you say when people say the influence should be heard, I agree because I was reading a couple articles and then I heard who did I hear say it? I was listening to the radio. I think it was DJ Envy from the Breakfast Club, and he was saying, which I've known for a while, that some of these kids are being paid to do these crimes, like the carjacking, just so they can get money. He said something about they'll give them
Hmm.
2,000. they sell a car overseas for like 20,000, and the little money that they get, that's a lot to them. So I think they are influenced by
They're being
mhm,
they're being taken advantage of in those cases because these higher level adult criminals, for lack of better words, know that they'll be tried as children.
yeah, yep,
Um, and so I can just pay them. Children don't have the best judgment because they're children.
right, right,
They see money. They're probably thinking, "Hey, I can help mom out." Um, I see it all the time, but when we talk about influence, we also have to talk about what our children are being exposed to.
hmm,
Um, People have gotten so severely protective of their children, but that also can cause harm because we forgot about the village.
right, right,
So we forgot about what our children see walking to and from school. We forgot about what our children see in the type of TV that we watch that they get indirectly. We forgot what they see and are influenced by um, our current culture of entertainment. The kids don't necessarily separate, this isn't life, this is entertainment. And even reality TV isn't real, it's entertainment. And they see it as real,
right,
and
right,
their judgment is affected by what they're indirectly told that this is life.
right, right.
It's very, very different from when we were kids.
Absolutely. I because I what's crazy? When I was a kid, I'm trying to think, was I like a Dennis the Menace, like causing a whole bunch of trouble and not really understanding what I was doing? I think I was more like a Dennis the Menace, like just a little worse in terms, like I did a lot
Problem
of,
child.
yeah, I did a lot of bad things, like I did I did a lot of bad things, not so much in school, at a young age, as I got older in school, yeah, but um, as a young kid, I would like I explained this before. I would come out of the house, right? I would look down the street and there's a whole bunch of kids there. This is how I knew I wasn't a good kid. I come outside, look down the street, and there's a whole bunch of kids out there playing football, basketball, whatever. And this, I start walking down there, and as soon as the closer I got, the less kids there was. Like they would spread. I don't know. This is kind of ghetto for me to say this, but
Really?
I had roaches in the house when I was a kid. You turn on the light, they start scattering. So with that said, when I come outside and I walk down the street, everybody starts scattering. Like, and then it's just like, well, why? And then when I finally get there, nobody's there pretty much. So one time I snuck behind a couple of houses, and then I just jumped out on everybody. And everybody started scattering. I grabbed one kid and I'm like, why don't y'all play with me? Why don't y'all play with me? My mommy said I can't play with you. And then I remember just punching him right in his chest. And now I think like that's probably why they don't want to deal with me. So as a kid, I'm with my brother saying, starts at home, yeah. As a kid, I wasn't the greatest of kids, okay? But I know the times are different because I'm 48 years old. I mean, this is like in the 80s, so um I was different. Like, the bad kid then was not the same as a challenge kid now. I don't even want to say bad. Where do you think we went wrong? Where kids went wrong? When did kids start going from what I was to talking to their mothers like the hell with you, or you don't tell me what to do?
Ugh.
Beside the weapon of calling DIFUS or Child Protective Services.
But
That's
that's really,
that's the
honestly, that's
weapon.
really what it is. That it's we took the accountability away from the children and we put it all on the adults, but then took away the adults' ability to counter the behavior in effective ways. I mean, things like taking away the internet can be considered abuse. I've seen a case where a parent
Hmm.
took away this child's computer because he was acting up and his grades were slipping, and the child committed suicide because you took away his computer, and the parent is to blame.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
so I don't know, I don't remember if you mentioned it or not, say what I feel, but I work in the schools, and I have a lot of colleagues that I went to college with that I knew outside of working in the schools, and even in there, there's no real, and I was a dean once too, there's no real consequence that we can do other than suspension, which is proven doesn't work. But there's no real consequence we can give the children.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and the children know it and they use it. They will make up, well, okay, this teacher was didn't give me extra credit when I asked for it, so I'm gonna say they yelled at me. And we can get in trouble for yelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can get in
Yeah.
trouble for
Wow.
saying shut up to a 16-year-old while in the meantime they're cussing us out and threatening us. I've been threatened, I've been assaulted, and the power still lies in the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I have
I
no
mean,
recourse in those cases but to go to the police. And then if I do that, it's a moral dilemma for me because then I'm criminalizing the same people that I said I'm trying to help.
Right. Right. Brian
So,
Brian Lewis says the structure is missing. And I totally agree.
absolutely.
I totally agree. I
yeah,
100%
I
agree with you.
I think
And it's from the
it's
top down.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a multifaceted problem, Dre, and I think, and I want to kind of, I agree with you saying what you're saying, Empress, but I want to kind of challenge that too, because I think as the adults, as the elders, is first of all, it's accountability to share across, all of us. We talking about, the child, the parent, we're talking about organizational structure, or what I mean, of everything, schools, and we talking about the prisons and the pipeline from school to prison and all these different things. We talking about, demand or whatever you want to call it. We all have to take some ownership, and like you said, you led to it earlier, Empress. It takes a village, right? And but
Right.
I think as times are changes, the challenge is on us to change too. Like, something was, my mother said something very profound to me, right? She said to me, my mom, was definitely, spare the rod, spare the child type person. If I, we acted up, we catch them, we catch that whooping, you know what I'm saying? And,
Yeah.
and that's what it was, and that held us accountable. Like, oh snap, it's like that little bit of fear. Sometimes fear is good, but my mom said to me as an adult, like, not even that long ago, and we were having a conversation about things, and she just said, I wish I used a different method with y'all. And I said, well, and I thought, like, wow, we turned out all right, we okay. But she was like, she's got to start talking about, our history in operating in a white supremacist culture where capital punishment was the way. We're talking about whipping and beating and lynching and different things like that were the methods to quote unquote discipline us, and how that's trickled down into the way that we raise our children, right? So I mean, I'm not saying, listen, I'm not telling no one that you shouldn't spank your kids, whatever case may be. I don't even have children, honestly. I work with a lot of kids from as young as 10 years old to, I work with mostly young adults now, anywhere from 18 to 25 years old. So I've seen the whole thing take place, all across. And I will say that these kids are built a little different. It just is. And
Yeah.
it's up to me and up to us, these gatekeepers, these people holding this knowledge, to challenge ourselves to find different methods to get across to them. It might not be the same way. These kids don't. It just is. We talk about bullying. And when I was young, someone say something to you, better toughen up. And we use that words don't hurt us, you know what I mean, and all that different kind of language. Well, now we know words can hurt you, and you
Words
sit there and find
absolutely
yourself
do hurt.
years later, sometimes even myself, find myself years later thinking about things that happened to me as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, how much it affect me? I don't feel like it affect me that adversely, but to a kid now, you got kids, willing to almost take their life over these things.
Or
So
somebody
all
else's.
all that
So,
all of that is to say is that someone has to be accountable. All of us have to take this challenge upon ourselves to figure out what it takes to get across to these youth, so we can kind of try to right this ship, man. Because right now, violence is at an all-time high, and we see younger and younger kids committing more heinous crimes. You know what I mean? And it's really sad. It hurts, man. It hurts to see 12, 13-year-old kids committing murder or being murdered because they're subject to being out on the streets, man. And like as a service provider, what I mean, I'm struggling what ways to teach these kids, and the ways to get across to these kids. And if I'm not taking responsibility for it, who is?
Right, right. That
No,
makes
we
sense.
we all share a responsibility. I get extremely frustrated. So I got into education because I wanted to help kids that look like us. I was lucky enough to have parents who were fully involved and instilled in my education, but a lot of us aren't. We don't either have the capacity, the knowledge, or the time, depending on your house structure. And um, it's so frustrating because as teachers, we're like at the bottom of the totem pole. So the things that we know work, like we're the soldiers on the front line, and the things that we know work, and the things that we know
Hmm.
can reach our students and help our students, and you know do what's best for them. It's like our hands are tied with so many things. I can't tell you how many times I've lost my job because I've wanted to help, or been reprimanded for doing too much. That's not on the standard, don't worry about it. And I'm like, but that's not teaching.
Right, right,
I'm not teaching, like I have a degree in biology. Like I'm teaching science, but like I'm doing more than that. Kids spend more time at school than they do with their parents.
Right,
They see their
right.
teachers more than they see their parents. They see
mm-hmm,
their teachers more than they see their friends if their friends aren't in the same class or the same school as them. So the
right,
people that they
Yeah,
see every day, like, yes, I am fully responsible for my students, but it's like, yeah, you're responsible, but you can't do what you need to do with that responsibility.
right, right,
It's a very, very, very frustrating place to be, and a lot of the reason why
hmm
so many Black teachers get out of education.
mm-hmm,
no,
right,
I
There's
definitely get the
already a
impression. I
teacher
wasn't,
shortage.
yeah, and I wasn't trying to believe me. I love teachers. I think teachers are one of the most underpaid
Oh,
professions
don't get me
in
started
the
on
in the
that.
country for sure. With
yep,
the level of what they're dealing with right now, especially during this pandemic. I can't
Oh,
imagine.
please. They
So
had us work our
like I said, I
vacation.
don't want to. I
They
don't want to make my comments feel like I'm taking away from that. I just
No,
understand that
didn't
as
take
we
it
we
that way
try
at
to
all.
as we try to restructure how we approach this problem. It's going to take all hands in. As to kind of like
Yes.
rebuild the thing from the bottom up. And I know a lot of these things come from the top down, and we feel almost handcuffed. I work right now in the system. I work right now for a nonprofit organization that works to help homelessness and hope the hope is to end homelessness, and we provide one of the services we provide is permanent housing for our residents or for people who had some history of homelessness. In the building in the program that I manage, we have about 20 spots for kids designated as young adults. Okay. And we take these kids anywhere from 18 to 21. We take them at 18 to 24. We take them coming in, and our job is to give them the stability of having a home, trying to help them, and then giving them supports, the built-in supports to kind of help them navigate this thing called life, trying to figure out what their goals is, what they want to do in life, and move on. One of the major problems with this system is we're using the low income tax credit housing system to get vouchers. It's called a program based voucher, whereas that we get a voucher with PHA. It's called a program voucher where the person has a voucher with PHA, which fills up your housing authority, and they have an opportunity to live in this. They basically get subsidized rent but long as they're in this program, right? But but it's a lot of rules and different things like that for which we want to say is for these kids' best interest, but it depends on where the kids at, and how they receive that information. Some kids are successful, some kids aren't. And when you're trying to navigate, you got kids coming with all this trauma, all these different things, trying to give them this stable standpoint to propel them on to the rest of their life, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you got rules that say that the fact that you live in subsidized housing, you can't even go to school full time. You know what I mean? So
mm,
how we taking it? So like low income tax credit housing, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different perspectives on that. But you talk about a lot of times it's kind of built for a person who has like a stationary income. Where what I mean by that is their income's not going to rise or fall, but oh so much. You take kids to stay in this kind of low spectrum, what she call low income, where they can survive on a low rent where the subsidized by the government is paying like the rest of it, the rest of the rent for that building. But when you talk about a kid that's 19 to 20 and you're trying to teach them and inspire them to do more and be greater, and if they make too much money, they get kicked out their housing. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So
Yeah.
now it's back to
Yeah.
square one again.
It's
Just
like
we talk about
punishment.
these systems have us handicapped, and we have to kind of figure out, be creative in how we figure out how to restructure and get these kids the most that we can give them.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
And there's one, I heard one social worker tell a family, you don't qualify for benefits. And I know I'm all getting a little bit off topic here, but you don't qualify for benefits. But if you had one more kid, you would. So
Crazy.
you have another kid just to get these benefits to struggle
can't.
even more, because the amount of benefits that you're
can't.
getting ain't going to cover
Doesn't cover the
another
kid.
kid. Yeah. So it's interesting, man. But these are all of the things that these kids, the stuff that we're talking about, could be some of the things that these two teenagers experience. And it does play a role, man. And it's just like the mental health plays a role. Brian here says mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood to adulthood. I totally agree with that.
Yes.
One of the questions people were asking about these teens was that some of them were saying the parents need to be held accountable or charged. Some of them
But
even
you
went
don't
as far as saying
necessarily know
charged.
if it's the parents.
The
Exactly.
circumstances, right?
Exactly.
You
Right.
don't like this. It's very, very, very circumstantial, because how many? And these are, not to say these are girls. So how many girls? At that age, especially when puberty starts to kick in, they're rebelling at that age.
Right. Right.
I mean, I've worked with thousands of families over the years, and I've seen excellent parents and kids who were struggling.
Exactly.
And then I've seen like really awesome kids, and I'm like, how is that your parent?
Exactly.
I've seen, so you can't automatically say it's the parent. I do absolutely believe that those two girls should have a consequence, but again, the consequence should be fitting of their age, their mental state, and the action that they committed.
Right.
It should
Right.
truly be like, if we're gonna rehab, like, we can't say, okay, yeah, they're gonna go to juvie and it's rehabilitated. No, it's not.
Right. Right.
Let's be real about it. Like,
Yeah.
they need actual mental health counseling.
Right.
Even if they didn't need it before, you just took a life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's going to mess with you regardless.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Most people are not capable of that.
Right. Right.
And then I think one of the things you got to consider is, with recidivism. We're talking about, the likelihood a kid is going to recommit once they are put in the juvenile justice system. So, what are we really helping if we put just throwing kids in the juvenile justice system, and for them to only to recommit without, especially if they're not getting no supports, no way to kind of process, their brain and their body growing, first of all, and then process their environment and the things going on when they get out of there, or what they got forward to look home to, what kind of supports they have. I think, I mean, it's not a lot of quantitative studies on it. You're talking about, I know it's a lot of studies on adults and amount of time they go back to prison, but you can talk about kids, it's not required in the United States. And I think from what I saw, like maybe like 30, 39 states do it. But they have a lot of leeway on how they report. So they report like this. But I mean, how helpful is the juvenile detention system? How helpful is it to send kids to prison if they're only going to go back to prison again? If you don't have these mental self and these other aspects put into it. You look at them judges that was in Pennsylvania, like maybe like 10 years ago or so, that got caught being paid to send kids to juvenile detention centers. You know what I mean?
I
And
remember
these
that.
two judges in Luzerne County in Pennsylvania, they both were convicted for receiving millions of dollars for sending kids to prison. So that lets you know this is bigger than these kids in their situation. We're talking about a universal problem in this country, where we feel as though prison is the one and only answer for solving rehabilitation problems. And the fact that it's known that for-profit prisoning is the major contributor here, where people are being where states are being sued if we don't have a certain amount of kids, a certain amount of people in jail. So like, we gotta look out. We gotta think about who's looking out for us, because we are talking about kids of color here. Let's call it for what it is, And we talking about, when we talk about equality and equity across all boards, kids that look like us aren't being charged the same way as kids who may have a lighter skin tone, and
Absolutely not.
that's just a fact, man. So with all the
But
people
there's
crying for
even
all this out for, I'm sorry, that's it. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. Go ahead, finish.
I know I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. I know I'm rambling,
No, it's
but
all
it's
good,
something
man.
that it's something that
You're
works me
good.
up,
It's a passionate
because
thing, man.
all this outcry, all this, everything you hear, everybody this, all this advocating. These kids need to do this and this. Like there's no end. There's no chance these kids will ever have the change their ways. And when you had this kid, remember that I always think back to this kid that was in California that raped a girl. That they caught raping a girl, that like the college swimmer and all that, and he spent like 3 months in jail. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I'm not comparing their crimes. We're talking about taking a life to another savage crime, and this is a serious crime. But I'm just saying, like, it's too much information, too much statistics, too much that we know about the failures of this prison system. So before we start talking about condemning kids to this for the rest of their life, we need to try to start reevaluating the way we do things.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And
Um,
you made me think of something really interesting, because how many of those children are sent to prison for either or juvenile just detention centers for nonviolent crimes or crimes that they just didn't commit and they just didn't have the right legal representation.
right.
Hmm.
Now you're in a place where survival mode kicks in. You pick up habits that you did not have.
Yeah.
They're in there for the rest of their now brain formation. They come out at 18.
Right.
Things that you tend to do between the ages of 12 and 18, those are your habits for the rest of your adult life.
Yeah. Dre
Like, think
Jackson.
about the things that are innate to you now. Those are
Right.
things that you developed in high school.
Dre Jackson says, one thing I believe is that a lot of kids are lumped together in one group, and I honestly feel if there if there were resources that can reach the kids on their levels to see what motivates them and makes them tick. What does it say?
Individually.
Oh, I couldn't see
Individually,
it. I
there
need to
would be
check my
better
eyes.
results.
Individually, yeah, they would be get better results, and I agree with that. Some may be too far gone, but most aren't. So I agree with that.
Right.
I agree with
That's a
that.
great point.
Right.
That's a great point. We got to
We are supposed
reevaluate.
to reach them on their level
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
We got
and
to
bring
get
them
down.
up to
That's we.
where their potential.
Hmm.
yeah,
And we
Hmm.
talk about preventative measures. Let's talk about preventative measures. About now, obviously, in this case, it's too late. Things have happened, but it just highlights the problem. You're talking about kids 15 and 13 years old. Think about the things that you've done at that age. Think about the things you've done and didn't consider any consequences for. Think I was like Dre, you talked about your childhood. I was a mischievous kid. I've done a bunch of things now that I would have been in a whole bunch of trouble for. I mean, as a kid, that I would have been in a whole bunch of trouble for now. But thank with God willing, I'm here to talk about it. But it was just you don't the way we process information at that age is just not the same. So we got to be trying to figure out ways to help these kids. Like I said, we need to put more effort into figuring out what the preventative measures are instead of talking about the punitive and responsive efforts are at the end,
right,
or reactive
Right.
efforts, for so to speak.
Right.
right,
As a dean, I used to always teach my kids act, don't react. But then they're surrounded by a world that's reacting to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
it's counterproductive in a lot of ways and
right.
confusing for them.
Yeah, yeah. And these
It's,
kids,
it's confusing for me. So
yeah, they got,
it's
yeah.
confusing for them. You know what I mean?
And they grow up. They got to grow up so fast. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's hard.
especially with their
It's hard.
environment. Like, I remember, I don't know how old my daughter was. I think it was Maya. She must have been 9. I don't know, somewhere around there, playing with dolls. And one of the kids, her age, was like, "You still play with dolls?" And it's just like,
And that's so upsetting.
is the norm not to, like, when you know what I'm saying? It's just like, wow, she's
Yeah.
9, whatever age she was, it was appropriate for her to play with dolls.
Right.
And that girl was just like, "You still play with dolls?" So it's just like some of us got to grow. Some of them have to grow up so fast, and it's sad. It's sad because it's like your childhood is getting stolen. The world,
Yeah.
the way the world is, the standard of the world is stealing the innocence from children because they have to grow up a little faster. That's
It's
just
scary
that's
as a
just what it
parent.
is. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
scary as a parent.
And and it's funny because before we started the show, in my opinion of if these children should go to jail or juvenile detention, and I'm like, well, if they get 10 years, maybe they should do some time in juvenile detention and then finish the rest of the sentence
No.
in jail. But now I don't think that because, and honestly, I was on it, like I was on both sides of the fence because the kids that I work with, I know they can be rehabilitated. A lot of them can. So I think we need to put more efforts into rehabilitating some of these kids because what happens is when they, and I didn't even bring this up or think about this. When kids go to jail and juvenile detention, there are a couple of things that I wrote down that could happen to them, which makes things even worse. One of them,
Right.
children. It says here, a study showed that children are at a high risk of being sexually assaulted in prisons. And what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen when they get out? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I was
We don't.
assaulted. I'm going to do it. You think of better ways to do it or whatever.
Or
So
they're re-victimized.
yeah,
Yep.
They're
yeah,
like
Yep.
being a victim
Yep.
of sexual assault actually increases your risk of it happening again.
right,
Yep.
right, yeah,
Yep.
yep. And some of these,
Some areas.
mm-hmm,
That's a good point
Juvy's
that Drake
worse
just
than jail.
saying.
Yeah.
yeah, and
Juvenile detention is worse than jail.
yeah,
Yep, it is,
I
and a
had
lot
a
of
student. Sorry,
it,
go ahead.
there's a higher risk of suicide also.
mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because some of them coming in there, they're not used to that. Even you get some gangbangers that go into jail and they can't
And ain't
handle
used
it.
to it.
So if somebody innocent like making a silly mistake, it's not a silly mistake, a serious mistake like that. Um, you know, it's kind of you don't want them to have to go through that and make them worse.
Yeah.
That
But a lot of our children are self-medicating
mm-hmm,
because like s- even now in 2021, like in the Black community, mental health and getting counselors and getting therapists and talking about your feelings, especially if you're young boys, is still so taboo.
right,
I've had
mm-hmm.
students where the therapist diagnosed them with depression and their parents are like, nope, they're not depressed, they're just dramatic, we don't need to see you anymore, and pulls them out.
yeah,
Mind you, this child is suicidal.
selfish
you know
acts. Yep, selfish
um
acts.
and it's a domino effect. I think some parents look at it as like parent guilt. No, I didn't, like, my child is fine, there's nothing wrong with my child. I've seen that.
Right, right.
I've seen just the stigma against mental health and the embarrassment that people attach to it. um and then a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's unaddressed trauma from the parents' childhood,
Yeah, yeah,
and it
Yep.
just you
Yeah,
pass it
I
on.
got I got through this. You can get through it too.
yep,
I
Absolutely.
figured
My
this out.
grandmother
You got
raised
to
all of
figure out a
us in
way
one
too.
room.
Yep,
yeah.
yep,
And
yep. Because she talked about the stigmas against mental health in the Black community, and I think that's a huge problem with us. I
yeah,
think even as adults now, is people like I had a conversation with my friends the other day. It's like, and I told him straight up, man, dog, you need therapy. He said, y'all my therapy. I said, no, listen, I'm your support, bro.
right,
You can
right.
talk to me as much as you want to talk to me about whatever you need to talk about me, but I'm telling you, I see a problem and you need professional help with it. And that's just straight up as your friend. I told you that. Now, obviously, my experience in the mental health field, I'm a lot more open to this, but we talking about Black folk in general. It is a huge stigma against mental health services, and when you come to trying to evaluate that, and some of it is rightfully so. You dig me? Because when you're talking about big farm and how these doctors want to put these kids on these medications and give them these diagnoses, and these facilities who get paid more money to have kids on medication, they're not going to advocate as much for the kid as you would think, right? They're going to tell the parents what the doctor told them, who was also being influenced by a big pharmacy. So this
Yeah,
is I mean, I'm talking about the more of the we talk about structure and the system of oppression and white supremacy in general, because I'll use that word because that's what we all operate in, regardless of what anyone wants to believe. This country Black people were brought to this country under the belief that you are less than a man, period. And this is where we started from, and that stigma to some people has never left. You know what I mean? As we
It
talk about
hasn't.
as age progressed, as time went on. You know what I'm saying? So listen, this is what it is. And it's in the systems. It's not coincidence that we in some of the most impoverished community in this in across the United States, and victims are the most violent in the most violent communities across the United States. And this is what we see every day. It's not coincidence. It was purposely made that way. So for us to try to figure out ways to solve it, we have to come collectively as a community and start protecting, ourselves. We can't. I don't want to take away the blame, or like, or saying that, or try to like put the all the honest or all the pressure on the victims, because we are victims of white supremacy. I don't want to put it all on us, but we have to take some hold and some accountability about our community, period. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
that's what, now to me, that's where it starts at. We got to advocate more instead of everyone's jumping on the internet, commenting this, commenting that, and this is what we're looking at as validation, but that's not true. You got to really go outside, look outside your window, and see what's going on, and really figure out what you want to be a part of, and how you want to live.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, the best thing that we were given in life is from God is the ability to breathe and choices. And some of these choices that we make, they have good and bad consequences. So
But see, here's the thing: are we making informed choices?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at that age, they don't see past 5 minutes of their action. They
True.
can't
True.
see 5-10 years into the future.
That's
Most
true.
kids who are 13, they have like, what do you want to be when you grow up? They have a list of 16 different things. Or I want to be an astronaut. But you're like 6'7" and you can't fit anywhere in a in a in a
Right.
space shuttle. So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a horrible thing to take somebody's life.
Yeah.
But we don't trust them to vote, but we're gonna trust them to make an adult decision.
Yeah. True. True. And one thing I
No,
want
they made a child's decision and that had an adult's consequence.
right. Right. And one thing I want to show something on this screen, and I'm going to ask you a question after I show a couple of these pictures. So, this is the actual scene of where the carjacking happened. This is the actual car right here. It's the car, and this is it from a top, like an aerial view. What do you
What happened? The car fell on him?
that they took off, and they took off with him in the car, and the driver hit a curb and the car flipped. So when it finished flipping, that's how it looked. Now,
Damn.
with those kids looking at that, I think when they see those pictures, I think they're gonna need some counseling, because
I think they're gonna need some counseling just being in the car and then seeing him laid up until the ambulance got there. They all stuck in the car.
Yeah, I honestly think, and I think we all need counseling. I think everybody needs counseling. You don't have
Everybody
to be
can
nothing.
benefit from it for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're not supposed to wait till something's wrong.
Right.
If we go and get a physical every year and get blood work just to make sure every other organ is working properly, why do we never get our brains
That
checked?
is an
It's
excellent point. That was an excellent point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We don't wait. Well, some of us do. I try not to. I've been doing very good. But you're not supposed to wait until you get sick to see a doctor. You get these checkups, make sure you're okay, which is what I got. I'm in a good, clean bill of health. But we're supposed to get these, they're preventative measures, not reactive. You know what I mean? So even with the counseling, I think we all would, like you said, Claude, we may not so much need it, but we would all benefit from it, because sometimes we just,
I think absolutely,
talking to other people, it's good, especially if you're talking to somebody who's not your friend, who's not going to tell you or be on your side or be like, yeah, you right, so
objective.
Yeah.
Somebody objective who doesn't know you, who can give you a perspective that your friends can't.
Yeah. Yep.
And let's be real, your friends are dealing with their own stuff. So, a lot of times they don't have the capacity to then deal with yours.
Right.
Like somebody who's a trained therapist, like they're trained to actually listen.
Right.
And if you've ever gone to therapy, like their listening is very, very different from you, venting to a friend.
Yep. Because your friend is going to listen and already have, while you talking, he going to be thinking of how to react to you and say something to you, what to say to you about it. Same thing with an argument.
Oh, girl, we gonna get him. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. Same thing with arguments. Like Claude, sometimes I be on Facebook talking about sports and stuff, and sometimes catch myself thinking about what am I going to say if he say this? Like once in a blue moon. Usually I read what they say and then I react, but half the time I'm wrong. You know what I mean? And even in Claude has put me in my spot in my place sometimes. But that's what we
I love
need. We need it.
right.
We need people like that. We can't. Everybody that agree with you is not going to do you any good if
No.
everybody's agreeing with
No,
you. You think
there's
I
no
should?
growth. There's no growth if
None.
everybody just pandering
None.
and
But
and
you
telling
also
you
need to be
what you think
receptive to
they think
hearing
you
it.
want to hear.
Yeah.
You gotta hear something really that's going to resonate with you and get you to change. We're not and people, a lot of people is a person is not going to change until they understand they need to make a change, right?
Wow.
You talk about the cycle of change, and
And want
we
to
get to
make a
that
change.
the first part. They want to make a change. You got to really understand that a change needs to be made because you talk about that. You talk about the cycle of change and psychological therapy terms. It's that pre-contemplative state where you're not even
Mm-hmm.
thinking that anything is wrong. You know what I'm saying? And then from pre-contemplative, you get to contemplative, like, hold up, damn, maybe I am tripping a little bit. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And then
Right.
something
Hmm.
usually gonna take something severe to hit you, like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I need to change. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's kind of how it goes. So that's what people we need, like you said, we need to start thinking more preventive. We need to start thinking of what we need to do beforehand before something too severe happens to us.
Right.
And in the
Right.
case of these kids, I'm sure it was plenty of signs by many people that these kids were just straying down the wrong side of the wrong side of the road, stemming towards this around the wrong people, making poor choices. And unfortunately, the support system that was in place, if it was any support system in place, wasn't strong enough to keep these kids from making this fatal decision.
Right. Right.
And it's
I was
understanding down
actually
there
gonna
that
say, like, I was gonna say that the support system doesn't even need to be just for the kids. Like, families need support.
mhm,
Right. Right.
Like I said, we somewhere along the way we forgot the village, so it's usually just parent and child, and
Right.
many times just a single parent, whether a dad or a mom. Like, families need support.
I agree. I agree. You know what's funny? Real quick before we get up out of here. When I was a kid, I told y'all I did some things. I did some things. There was a tree stump. They cut the tree and there was nothing but the stump. So me and my friends sticking paper in there. I take a
That's
match
something
and
else too.
I'm just joking with them. Like I took the match and I just went like this. I'm gonna light it on fire. It was the match was lit and it burned my hand and I just dropped it. And all of a sudden, it was so much paper in there that the flames just went. The fire department came and they had to put out the fire. I ran home. I sat in a room like this, and then I heard a
And now,
knock.
if you had been caught,
Yeah,
that's arson.
I heard a
And
knock.
just being a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah, I heard a knock on the door. She's like, "You know what your son did?" And it was just like it's like each one teach one. Like parents were coming to my mother's door, like, "Yo, this is what he did." So, but we were like a community. She was like my mom, this lady. So I think we're
Hmm.
missing that. And another point I want to make is that those kids, when they were carjacking Mr. Anwar, I'm sure they didn't think it was going to turn out like that. So like with me with burning a tree, um, luckily it was just a tree that burned down, right? But what happened if a little kid was outside and they went over there and they didn't know better and it burned them and then they got burned, got all these burns on their hand and all. Then it was like it's my fault. So my point is saying
Right.
is that these kids they did do something. They actually thought about carjacking somebody. It was premeditated, but the killing part wasn't so much something that
No.
they thought they would do. But so we just need to
They
keep
also
keep
probably
that
thought
in
it
mind.
was like the movies.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we need to keep that in mind uh before we judge these kids. So uh that's my last word. I want you guys to just give one last word before we get out of here. I'll start with you, Claude.
um yeah, I guess let me think. uh Objective, and perspective. That's what I'll leave you with. We gotta its perspective has to be taken into every account all the time. We gotta look at look at things from a objective standpoint about about the things affecting the decision making process and why people do things, like we're talking about in specifically to these kids. I think it's easy to sit up on our high horse and say, oh, this and that. If that was my kid would never, different things like that. But we haven't lived this kid's experiences. We have no idea or no concept of the things that could be possibly going to. So just take a minute to show some empathy, and put yourself in the shoes of the people surrounding these kids and understand that, unfortunately, a life was lost. And I'm never going to minimize that. But we have to also understand that we got two more lives that it's an opportunity
Hmm.
to teach them. And
To say.
hopefully they will learn from it. And, that's the best that we can hope for.
All right, all right. Impressed?
Um, while I totally understand the immediate reaction is I want them to pay. They took my dad, they took my brother, they took my son. Because Mr. Anwar was somebody's family. Um, we still have to also understand that just throwing the book at people, children or adults, doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't undo the crime, and it doesn't prevent them from committing another crime. As a matter of fact, it increases their chances of committing a crime again. Some people actually want to go back to prison because we've taught them that's the only way they can function.
Hmm.
So we need a better system of consequences.
Right, right. Well,
Next time, Dre, you give me a warning before you do that, because I wasn't ready for the last word. You caught me by surprise.
oh yeah, my bad, man. Well, that's
It's all good. I'm
going.
just playing. I'm just playing.
Well, that's going to do it, Claude. Impress, stay on. That's going to do it for us, everybody. I hope you got something out of this. I know I did. And I just ask that, just remember, there's more than one victim in this particular incident, and just keep both sides, both families in prayer. And we're going to leave it at that. So everybody be blessed, stay safe. Love you much, and see you next week.
Thank you for watching the Speak Now Hold Your Peace live broadcast. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and join us on the Speak Now Hold Your Peace Facebook group.